Well, good afternoon. My name is Bart Reed. I'm the president of ProGenesis. We're an organizational development firm that helps individual leaders and organizations thrive. And you have come to part 2 of our F.A.I.L series about how to be the most effective leader when failing. So stick around. Well, as I said before the introduction, this is a second in a series of 4 videos about the word fail. And if you remember from a couple weeks ago in that video, that FAIL is an acronym, F-A-I-L. And the F of FAIL was all about focus. We talked about that leaders that understand that when they fail, they can ask questions like, what went well? What didn't go so well? What can I learn from this? Will set themselves apart from the competition because they're able to be introspective. They're able to have self-presence and self-awareness in the midst of failure. So F is for focus. The A, well, before we get into the A, let me paint the picture for you. If you remember from when you were a little boy or a little girl, and hopefully I'm not dating myself too bad, there was a board game called Chutes Ladders. Had a whole bunch of slides on them and ladders. And if you ever looked at that board, in the midst of it, there's one really tall ladder and there's one really big chute or slide. You always wanted to land on the space that had the big ladder to send you up far and close to winning the game, and you dreaded if you ever landed on that big slide to slide down that and send you back towards the beginning. Well, as we introduce this A word, I'd like you to keep that word picture in mind, the idea of chutes and ladders. And as I promised you at the end of the video, this is one of those skills, this is one of those values that you can have or virtues that you can have that if you really embrace this and understand this, it will set you light years ahead of the competition. And it will differentiate you and make you distinct from the leaders even in your own organization. So what is that A word? Well, you probably hear it a lot already. It's not a new word, and sometimes it's even taken out of context, but it is a word that is incredibly powerful. And that word, for leaders to understand, is accountability. Now, when I said that word accountability, I know some of you maybe have gotten a lump in your throat or a pit in your stomach because in our culture in particular, that word accountability or saying holding somebody accountable has a significant negative connotation. I'm not talking about that today. There's enough video out there about how you can force people to be accountable. We talk about the whip and the carrot. That's not what this video is about. Because there's not a lot of power in that. Where the power sits and where the influence sits and where the idea of leadership sits within accountability is the idea of self-accountability. It's not blaming others, it's not looking at how you can hold somebody accountable, but it's you looking yourself in the mirror and saying, how do I hold myself accountable in all situations? So you might be asking, Bart, what is self-accountability? Well, sometimes the best way to talk about what it is first start with what it isn't. If you go back to that Chutes and Ladders game, these behaviors that I'm about ready to talk about are the big slides that send you back to the beginning. So if you are a person who instead of taking self-accountability decides to blame others, that's you being sent down that slide. So if you're a person who says, well, I would have been able to, or I could have been able, or I shouldn't, or I couldn't because of the weather or the moon or this person or this policy or this thing, and you do it to pass off the blame to others and not to keep yourself accountable, that's a transfer of blame. That's not any kind of accountability whatsoever. Well, what's the effect of that? Well, people stop trusting you. They start giving you the bare minimum. Communication goes down. The whole idea of teamwork starts to erode because they're just waiting for the next shoe to drop, so you blame them the next time for something. So the sad reality is if you're not able to hold yourself accountable, if you're in this blame environment, then not only will you go down that big slide, but your whole team can go down that big slide as well. And we don't want that to happen. So we're going to talk about the 3 phrases that will help you understand self-accountability so you can really shine and go up that ladder. Now, before I give you the 3 phrases of self-accountability, just a reminder, send us a comment. I'd love to hear your comments. We've got some great feedback from our first video on focus. We'd love to hear those, and if they're pithy and if they're substantive, we'll put them on the next video and we'll talk about those. Or you can just email me at bart@progenesis.com and send me that email and let me hear about what you have to say about these 3 phrases. So, magic secret sauce of self-accountability, 3 phrases. The first one is to recognize there's a problem. I know that might sound very simplistic, but as a leader, when you can actually take the time and point out and say, hey, there's something going on we need to talk about. This happened, this challenge happened, this situation happened. Your people are most likely already aware, but if you have the self-awareness, the ability to kind of stop the train and say, hey, listen, something happened we got to talk about, it really sets you apart from another leader that's just going to push on through and pretend it didn't happen. Second phrase, and this is kind of a gut check as well, but it's really important for leaders to really, again, go up that big ladder on the chutes and ladders. Own what you can control. And again, I know that might sound simple, but when leaders say, this is what I own and this is what I can control and I'm going to own it, and they play their part in making sure they can reconcile or recover from whatever just happened, then other people can play their roles. If you don't own and control what you own, then other people can't play their roles. And we see this happen over and over again in organizations. When the leader is not taking ownership and they're not owning what happened, then people are scurrying around and trying to figure out what their role is and how they're supposed to act and how they're supposed to respond. So the second phrase is own what you can control. The last phrase is, I think, one of the most powerful phrases, and it's the ability to act with authenticity. You know, there's a lot of leaders that try to act when something goes wrong, and they try to either spin something or they try to sell people on something. But the most powerful leaders are those that in the midst of a failure can act with authenticity. That means being transparent, being honest. But if you notice, the first word is act. Don't just be authentic, act with authenticity. Move, do something. Make sure that you're changing, you're controlling, you're fixing, you're satisfying, whatever you need to do for your customer, for your organization, and for your team. Act with authenticity. Well, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. Thank you for thinking about the A of accountability. We want you to be one of those leaders who goes up the big ladder, not the long chute. And join us in a few weeks. We're going to talk about the I of fail. And just like the A, this is a doozy. I wish I saw more leaders acting within the I, but you'll have to check back in a few weeks to see what that is. Hope to see you soon. Have a great day.